I'm going to discuss a subject that we're told is not appropriate for conversation: religion. I believe that stems from the way people approach discussion. In my observations, many approach it from the position that their beliefs are infallible. It is not from a point of trying to understand another's beliefs. This causes a lot of problems. I'll get into that more later. I have spent much of my life learning about different religions. I was raised in a Christian faith that some other Christian faiths do not see as Christian. Even had a teacher who would never give me good grades because of my family's faith. Yeah, it was illegal, but couldn't really prove it. Like most kids, I didn't know anything outside my family's faith. I thought everyone had similar things. When I let slip one day to a friend that I spent 3 hours at church, they were shocked, because they only spent one. That was really my first understanding that there were different faiths. When I was a teenager, I started seeing many of the inconsistencies and flaws within the religion. My parents' relationship had deteriorated, and they were not as adamant about going to church every Sunday, if at all. I didn't want to go to church, so I was okay with that. I felt it was a waste of time. I had seen nothing that convinced me anything that was talked about was true. Even spiritually, I felt there was nothing there. I started to explore other things, and fell in love with a bit of the New Age stuff. I convinced myself I felt things that I didn't. It also helped along the path having a significant other who was into it. But a lot of the things I told myself I felt, I still feel today, though I have a better understanding of what they are, and it isn't some form of ESP. There were experiences of random chills going up my back or my whole body, which is a reaction of the body to many different stimuli or occurrences. There are past lives I thought I was remembering, which were actually fragments of dreams I had. There were simple explanations for everything I believed back then. I held those beliefs for a long while, though, and during that time I also sought out information on religions. I've always had a fascination with Japan, so I tried to find info on Shintoism and Buddhism. The town I lived in had a public library that was smaller than my personal library. They had no computers, I had no car, and really cheap dial-up internet. Finding information was not so simple. So I turned to the more easily accessible beliefs, and delved into them. I spoke with people of various faiths, wanting to learn, but most of those that were Christian preferred to preach than discuss, and there are few things more discouraging than wanting a serious answer to a question and being met with circular logic, or having the person refuse to talk anymore because they didn't have an answer. These discussions and failures to find any substantial responses soured me to Christian faiths. I have difficulties discussing faith with members of those denominations more than any other. Over time, I would find others to talk to from other faiths. These discussions have shaped my beliefs, which I will get into in a bit. During a part of my life where I was suffering deeply from depression and focusing considerably on me, in a selfish manner, I lived for a year with a Muslim man as a roommate. I wish I had been more open to discuss faith with him, but even still, I learned quite a bit from him. He would bring home food from various celebrations and freely share it. I developed a taste for jasmine rice because of him. I learned that there were different groups of Muslims as there are with Christians, like there are Lutherans, Calvinists, Protestants, etc. There are many different faiths under the Muslim umbrella. After gaining access to better resources for research, I lost a lot of interest in the topic. My depression took over a significant amount of resources, so my delving into Shinto and Buddhism was not as deep as it could have been, and I never went back to learn more. I spent more time researching Hinduism. I will clarify that most of my interest in religion stemmed from the Greeks and the Norse and their myths, so being ignorant at the time of starting the research, I felt it would be very similar. It was, and it wasn't. To put it in the simplest terms possible, it is pantheistic. Unlike the Greeks, the gods are all manifestations of another entity, as are we all to a degree. I am not an expert, and I would recommend learning more about any of these religions if you are curious. There are websites, there are people, there are books. Expand and learn. So where did all this searching get me? I don't really have a religion to speak of. My faith lies mostly in my friends and those I care about. However, I believe in all gods, but I worship none. I am sure for some people that doesn't make sense. How can you believe it but not worship? Worship is the active praise of a deity. It is constantly paying tribute, praying, exalting, etc. of a deity. Belief acknowledges that it exists. Much like a worshipper of Zeus would make sacrifices and offerings at his temple, but would not for Dionysus. If you would prefer a modern comparison, people worship Jehovah and acknowledge Lucifer exists. Belief does not denote worship. So I acknowledge all gods exist, but how can they all exist? The answer is much more straightforward than you might think. If you worship a god, that god is real to you. Nothing I do or say can change how real that god is to you. That is true of everyone who believes in a god. Their gods are real to them. I have also found that no two people worship the same god. They may share a name, but they will be different in some small or some large way. For each person, there is a different god or gods. Aspects may be agreed upon, but it is ultimately who their deity is to them that makes them different. A brief side note with all that said, there is a difference between faith and blind faith. For someone to have faith, they have searched and discovered. They have questioned and they have sought answers. Blind faith is listening to someone tell you what they believe and believing it without question. Be it a preacher, or a book, or a video on YouTube talking about religion. Strong faith cannot be built without questioning it. Returning to the beginning of this, talking about religion. It is something we should discuss more frequently. Discussions with the purpose of listening, not preaching. You have more to learn from someone with a differing faith about religion than you do from your priest, bishop, monk, imam, pastor, rabbi, etc. Some of the ideas you may laugh at. You may have laughed during this video. I found ideas held by most religions to be laughable at points in my past. It does not mean the belief is worthy of ridicule. It is different. It is not what you have come to believe or were raised to believe. Because it is one of the 3 topics people say not to discuss, it is seen as bad to even bring it up. But if it is such an important part of so many people's lives, why is it bad to discuss? I said before, it is because we see our beliefs as true no matter what. And I have stated that your truth is not the truth of someone else, even if they are of the same church. It is worth talking about. Not everyone will be willing to discuss their religion, and some will get defensive immediately because of the way religion is treated. One of the first steps into discussing is having a level of respect for the other person's religion, which can be difficult since some faiths' dogma require the demonization of all other religions. If you can respect someone having a differing opinion, it's a step in the right direction for respecting someone else's faith. If you choose to enter their place of worship, be respectful when you do. If you are unsure what is respectful, ask. I had the privilege of visiting a Buddhist holy site a few years back. There was a long walk to reach the site with wildlife and nature around. I took photographs of the animals and plants I saw along the way. As I grew closer to the building, I fell into silence, put my camera away, and proceeded as if the site were holy to me. I saw a friend a year or 2 later who had visited the same location and had photographed inside the building, while people were present, visiting their holy site. This is why I feel the need to mention this. You do not have to be of the faith to be respectful, and if you go that far out of your way to visit the holy site of another faith, it is not a tourist location, it is a site of worship. This applies too when visiting a place like Westminster Abbey, which has become a tourist location. Be respectful. It is an active church. They have prayers throughout the day. They hold service. It takes a conscious effort to visit another faith's religious site, and if you are not going to at least show the bare minimum of respect when going, stay away. You don't have to believe to let others worship peacefully. I also have to add, some religions are not deserving of respect. Not because I disagree with their beliefs, but because they hurt people with them, within or without their church. This is not me preaching, this is my personal view, and you may not see eye to eye with me on this. Actively harming people is one of my lines. I'm sure listening to this, at least one faith sprung to mind with this description. Faith should be a source of joy, not suffering. I have shared my beliefs and thoughts. You may agree, you may disagree. Either way, I hope you'll take into consideration the beliefs of others. Be kind out there, and have a good solar cycle. If you want to subscribe, please do. If you don't, I'm not going to hold it against you. If you have a topic you'd like me to discuss, or you're interested to know more about something I have discussed, ask in the comments.